or you can't remember your password, feel free to email marketing@rapidscale.net, and they will be happy to assist you with that. Lastly, we're also going to record this session, so it will be available in full audio visual format in the portal as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So today we're really going to talk about business continuity and disaster recovery solutions, and then kind of tie that into the RapidScale products and services and how we help our customers with those types of questions. So we always start our presentations with a market statistics slide, and this is really more just to educate the broader community on really what is the cost of downtime, what are the major causes of downtime. In this case, the average cost has been increasing year over year, and that's not really following inflation per se. That's essentially a 38% change in just the last 6 or 7 years from the costs. And you guys probably understand that more and more people are moving to the cloud, moving to digital records, away from human processes and paper documentation. So of course that number is going to be exponentially higher from a cost perspective. One of the biggest reasons for downtime is cybercrime. That's causing quite a stir lately, again, with everything being digital. Of course, cybersecurity is of the utmost importance, and we'll have a future webinar in the next couple of months around security, so definitely encourage everyone to try to join that one as well. In my personal experience, and about 19 years now in technology, human error is usually the cause of almost every problem. So definitely the root cause of an outage, 22% of surveys, from the Zeta State of Disaster Recovery Survey cite human error. And that's oftentimes, somebody making a change. If you guys will recall, a few weeks back, Amazon had a pretty major storage outage on their S3 product. Came down to human error. Literally one character typo in code took down the whole East Coast zone for Amazon. So nobody is impermeable to an outage, and certainly having a solid disaster recovery plan and business continuity plan is very important to most businesses these days. Again, almost every company surveyed, more than half reported an outage in the last year that lasted more than 8 hours in the last 5 years. So again, how many businesses can be down for 8 hours and really not feel an impact from that? So very few at this point in the evolution of technology. And again, here in the survey, about 67% estimate that their business would lose at least 20K of revenue for every day of downtime. So, that's not a huge number for most companies, mid-market and above, but, the smaller businesses, $20,000 is a ton of money, and that could literally put them out of business. So, I rarely, if ever, take the tactic of scaring customers into buying a service, but unfortunately, DR is one of those that, if you don't present factual data that can, help them make an educated decision, it's a tough sell because it's looked at as an insurance policy. So we'd just like to arm our sales partners with valid, market stats to help pitching that type of a service, right? So we get asked all the time, how do I calculate the cost of downtime? There's really not unless you are the business owner yourself, it's hard to come up with anything that somebody would believe. So the easiest way to do it is just take the customer's annual revenue. If it's $1 million, $10 million, $50 million, and you ask that customer, are you operating 24/7 or are you operating 8 to 5, Monday through Friday? And you essentially take those data points, and you either end up with 8,760 hours in a year, or you end up with 2,080 hours, and you can come up with the downtime, right? With the cost of downtime. So you're at $114 per hour per $1 million of revenue. For a customer running 24/7, or you're $480 per hour per million, in an 8x5 model. And most customers would, that's a believable number, right? Because, it's just an average essentially. So, that obviously scales to massive numbers if you're, $50 million, $100 million business. And then we have customers, for example, in that are tied up to the, financial markets doing, large sums of money trades, with ETF funds and whatnot. And those are the customers that pretty much pay for whatever they can to have 100% uptime. Not a hard sell for those guys. But your average, manufacturing company or insurance office, it's harder to sell them until you can show them a basic graph like this of how to calculate their downtime. So certainly there's a lot of different variables that go into, the reality of having an outage. Productivity loss is probably the main one that everybody's concerned about. If you've got 50 employees that can't do anything because you're down. And certainly most of the sales partners on the call have experienced that phone call when the customer's MPLS network is down, or their broadband connection is down, or their hosted PBX is down. They're getting that screaming phone call that nobody can work, because that's really the plumbing of their environment, essentially, right? So in our case, providing virtual desktops, providing hosted mail, providing infrastructure as a service, without access to that, your employees are essentially not able to do anything. So I think the one that's probably toughest to account for is that reputation damage, right? So when you're down and your customers, experience that pain of not being able to contact you, not being able to do business with you, your reputation gets tarnished, and you never know what phone call you missed, or that next, $1 million deal that didn't come through because you were down for a day. So it's hard to put a price on that, but it's certainly a component that is reflected in an outage. Obviously, revenue loss, we talked about how to calculate that on an average, so that one's not earth-shattering per se, but the one thing is the lost future revenue, right? What customer opportunity did you lose because they weren't able to contact you? Financial performance. So a lot of customers, kind of behind the scenes, if they're down, they can't make payroll, right? Or, they have, if they're a publicly traded company, they're down, their stock price takes a hit, whether they actually lost any customers or not. Perception is reality so often in this day and age. And of course, you have other expenses. Maybe you have a contractor there for 2 weeks to try to do some special project for you, and they're completely out of commission during that outage. So overtime costs, shipping costs, travel expenses. There's all sorts of things that that have an issue there. I know a lot of the folks in the Northeast are dealing with a huge snowstorm right now, and I had just happened to be on a plane with a gentleman earlier this week that had flown all the way from the West Coast to New York for an interview, basically to be turned around and sent home because all the people that were supposed to be interviewing him couldn't get into the office in New York City. And so however much that money cost that company to fly him out there, round trip from east to west, to have to repeat that in 2 weeks when everybody's available again, in this day and age, I can't imagine why somebody, can't still conduct a meeting, remotely or via web conference or video conference, as opposed to taking that extra expense for travel and expenses. So lots of things to consider there. So a lot of people ask us, what's the difference between business continuity and disaster recovery? And, ultimately business continuity is the whole plan. It's the all-inclusive plan. How do I deal with my employees in an outage? Where do I send them? Who makes the decision to declare the disaster? What are the, operational procedures? How do I still print? How do I still do payroll? So disaster recovery is actually pretty simple these days. 10 years ago, not so much, but there's so much advanced technology now where I can just simply put an agent on a server and replicate it real time to my data center. That's the easy part. Everybody's got that figured out. But what's the rest of the plan? How do people access that data when it's in the DR site? That's really the key. So business continuity is really focused on the proactive measures that companies need to put in place to ensure that there's a solid plan if they do have to fail over to the disaster recovery site. So disaster recovery itself, that's sort of the reactive solution, right? We've got the data there. We're reacting to a situation. We're making a decision to fail over. Sometimes that's customers replicating their infrastructure from their premise to us. Sometimes that's us replicating their production environment that they already have with us to another data center. And I think most of you know RapidScale has 5 data centers globally, so we're pretty well positioned to support customers' geographic needs from a DR perspective. Sometimes, and actually more frequently, we're getting customers coming to us from other cloud providers that want to not have all their eggs in one basket, and they'll ask us to replicate their environment from another cloud services provider data center to us. The one thing that I really like to talk about, especially with sales partners, is selling DR is, again, it's like selling insurance. It can be challenging, but with the right data, it's pretty simple. But if you focus your practice or your consulting agency around, anybody can sell you DR. Let's talk about business continuity, how you're going to access that data. If you really think about it, the best providers to choose to deliver a DR solution are the ones that can also handle virtual desktops or some method of remote access to that data. So RapidScale, we really pride ourselves on being able to actually focus on the whole plan, right? So many providers will say, yep, I've got a Zerto agent or a double take agent or a never fail agent on the machines. You're good to go. And then the customer says, well, how do I get to that data? And they'll say, that's your problem, not ours. So at RapidScale, we really strive to make sure that customers test their solutions, make sure that we give them a way, if they need it, to access that. So oftentimes we'll front end their DR site with a virtual desktop solution, and we'll scale that up in the event of a disaster. So let's say they have 500 employees, right? We just put a very minimal base kind of 20 user BDI solution in front of their DR site, and then that way it gives them the ability to test it, annually, biannually, however frequently they want. And they have their applications installed, and it looks just like it would if they were sitting in the office in their corporate headquarters. Disaster is declared, we fire up and scale that within minutes to the full 500 desktops and give them the ability to operate no issue whatsoever. So the one thing I always caution sales partners and even customers on is don't wait till the last minute. I literally got a phone call on Monday from a customer that had been in a proof of concept with us for this and really loved it, and they were basically trying to get budget approval and move forward, and then the storm hits in the Northeast and they want us to build out their entire environment in 8 hours. And that's just too late. I mean, that doesn't set us up for success. That's not setting themselves up for success. Lots of room for human error, and ultimately that's not the way you should operate your business. So as a consultant or a partner on the phone, it's really important to use those as learning opportunities for you and your customers that this is not that expensive of a solution, especially when compared to what they spend on their production environment. So at least have some method to fail over. So couple of key concepts, and most of you that have sat on any kind of disaster recovery training probably already know this stuff, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this slide, but RTO and RPO, very important variables, probably the only two you even need to know from a DR perspective. So RTO is recovery time objective. All that means is how long can you be down, or how long are you willing to be down given a budget, right? So if you go down at 4 p.m. on a Friday, when do you really need to be back up before you start suffering? Most customers will tell you they can't be down at all. And then they see the quote for having 2 sites in an active-active situation, and they say, okay, I could be down for a few hours. I would tell you just industry-wide, the most common SLA around recovery time objective is 4 hours. And I think most 90+% of companies are more than acceptable from that perspective. We can ratchet that down to as low as 15 minutes, and we can go all the way as high as 24 hours. If you have a customer that says they can be down for days, they don't need disaster recovery. They need backups, and we'll talk about that on the next slide, I believe, here. So the other variable is recovery point objective. That's how much data can they lose, right? So, if they go down at 4, how much data can they lose? Is it an hour's worth? Is it a day's worth? Is it 4 hours worth? Our solutions are designed around no data loss, but there's other providers out there that may only put an hour around the protection of their data. So in our case, we replicate the data real time, so we'll have near zero recovery point objective as our solution. And really what causes that to go to 30 seconds or a minute or 5 minutes is the network latency, right? So if the customer has plenty of bandwidth, it will be as close to zero as technologically possible. If they're on a 10 meg connection and they have a ton of change going on, when that disaster happens, we might be a few minutes of data loss. But we do a really good job of consulting with that customer, explaining to them what affects the RPOs, making sure they have enough network bandwidth to replicate to meet their RPO requirements. So those are kind of very important things to understand when consulting on a DR solution for your customers. Another thing to keep in note, backups is not a DR plan. Backups is part of a business continuity plan, but it's not a disaster recovery plan. So as mentioned, I had a partner call me from Texas last night that said, hey, I've got a customer, really all he wants, he said he could be down for 2 to 4 days. And this customer happened to be a very, very simple, call it widget manufacturer, right? They make a couple widgets a month, they sell a couple widgets a month. If they're down for a few days, so they're a few days behind on delivering that widget. Not that big of a deal. So for them, we quoted cloud backups. So cloud backups is a very, very scalable, very inexpensive solution to back that customer's data up off-site. And worst case scenario, if a plane lands on his building, we can restore that data to virtual machines in our cloud in 2 to 4 days. That's not a problem. We're happy to take those customers. I just encourage folks to understand that that's not a DR plan. That's just a component of a business continuity plan. So cloud recovery, at RapidScale, we use 2 different software technologies to recover our customers into our cloud if they're coming from premise. We use DoubleTake for the physical servers, right? So if they have still, for whatever reason, they have a physical server in their premise, or maybe they just haven't had time to virtualize it, we put DoubleTake on that server. We replicate it real time to a machine in our cloud, and we can recover that within 4 hours with no issue and very, very minimal data loss. Most of our customers these days are virtualized, whether that be with VMware or Hyper-V, or they're in another cloud provider, and that's where we utilize Zerto. They're sort of the industry leader in data protection from a virtualization perspective. We can do real-time replication. We can set up recovery plans, which means oftentimes in a larger environment you have to have some servers up before others, and it's just part of an application that requires that. So we can schedule all that out. We can test it. We can basically automate it to the point where when they declare, they log into the portal and click a button. Certainly, as mentioned before, that's not the overall plan to deal with employees and DNS changes and things that are out of our control as a provider. But from a data recovery perspective, it is that easy these days. So very, very simple to deploy and manage. And we always encourage customers to take advantage of those annual tests that are included in the service. From a RapidScale perspective, a couple of things that differentiate us. We don't charge a declaration fee. So the fine print of most of our friendly competitors are anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 fees to declare a disaster. We do not charge any declaration fee. The other thing is we allow our customers to operate on our platform for 30 days at no charge, other than the fee that they're already paying for disaster recovery services, right? If they go beyond the 30 days, we offer to convert them to a production contract, or we fail them back to wherever they failed over from. Those are really the only 2 options in that scenario. And then lastly, and we probably should have put this in the slide, we don't charge for bandwidth. for any of our customers, not just disaster recovery, but what you'll commonly find is wherever they're replicating from, they have bandwidth expenses, and maybe it's variable and maybe it's fixed, but there's still an expense there. Inside the RapidScale Cloud, we include unlimited bandwidth to all of our customers. So replicating into us, there is no variable fee. A lot of providers will charge on the 95th percentile or data transfer rates for this type of service, and that's a fee that you just never know what it's going to end up being every month. If there's a month where a ton of changes were made in the environment and that required a lot of extra replication for DR to work, that's a variable expense. So it is a big differentiator for us to basically give that customer peace of mind that their bill is going to be fixed until they add more servers to the environment every month. Some use cases. We always like to get into the use cases for our technical webinars, especially. Client challenges. Want to add a vendor and geographic diversity to a DR portfolio. Existing IT company was using Veeam to back up to a local data center. Their current solution didn't provide the client with the recovery time objective they were looking for. So they were looking for a provider that uses real-time replication as opposed to just backups, and had a data center not running on the same grid as their production environment. So probably a semi-educated customer opportunity here, right? I mean, in reality, there's only 2 power grids in the U.S., so it's pretty hard to get away from that if they happen to be in both. But in this case, where we are in Texas, and that's the major secondary grid outside of the Northeast, so we're very happy to accommodate that customer's requirement. So our solution will be leveraging Zerto, as mentioned before. So we're doing real-time replication, and we can have their entire production environment up and running in 4 hours or less. And then the other thing that we consult on quite frequently is there's sometimes a requirement for servers to just be up and running live in our environment, where it doesn't make sense to use technology like Zerto or DoubleTake. For the big example is like Active Directory. We never use replication software to replicate that, because replication is built in natively to Active Directory. So we just run a live machine on our side for that. In this customer example, they had a faxing server, right? So we were able to put a faxing virtual machine in, connect that up to a SIP trunks for faxing, and basically their failover plan was to call their SIP provider to switch their DIDs over to the secondary SIP environment. So in that case, we're exceeding the client's needs. We came in under budget, and we worked with them to build a detailed business continuity plan that outlined all the roles and responsibilities of us, of their faxing provider, of their SIP provider, and really put in a plan to help them execute in the event of an actual disaster. So the initial agreement, around $7,500 a month. By the time we were done, for the partner, they're billing near $11,000 a month, and a very, very happy customer. So that concludes the presentation, but definitely happy to open it up to questions, comments, anything anybody wants to know more about that we can touch on. So I'll pass it to marketing to ask the questions.
We have one right now. Can you replicate or sync the data with an AWS or Azure infrastructure on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Zerto recently announced support for the hyperscaler clouds, so we can go either direction. We can replicate from Amazon and Azure into our cloud, or vice versa. If they want to replicate out for an extra layer of protection, we can absolutely support that. Great question.
Nothing right now. I'll give it a few.
All right. So while we're waiting for additional questions, I just want to thank everybody for their time. Usually my webinars are a little bit shorter than the sales ones, mostly because we don't want to bore you with too many technical details. We just want to give you enough to arm you with good technology and market stats to help you to sell the various services and products that we offer here at RapidScale. So we've got a lot of really cool webinars coming up on new stuff that we're deploying. So definitely encourage everyone to keep an eye out for us. And then also, I believe this is the last technical webinar before Channel Partners comes up in Las Vegas next month. So definitely want to encourage everyone that's attending or thinking about attending. We're going to have an awesome demo platform set up for our services up on the pool decks at the Mandalay Bay there. So we'll have engineers there to answer any questions. We'll have our marketing team and our entire sales and pre-sales team there as well. So if anybody wants to know more, wants a hands-on demonstrations, or just wants to chat about opportunities and your customers, we'll have about 15 rapid scale employees there that week. So definitely reach out to your channel manager or marketing if you don't know who that is to schedule time to meet up with us.
Okay, we're definitely getting some questions in.
Awesome.
So let me try to organize my thoughts for a second. Would you mind comparing and contrasting backup versus DR? I know you covered it some, but is the management component available for both?
Absolutely. So backups, again, are a scheduled process, right? So we install an agent on the machine, and we go through a little wizard that basically says, hey, do you want to back up the whole machine, or you just want to back up a folder or a file or a subset of folders and files? And then kind of the next question is do you want that, how often do you want it backed up? So most customers will do backups daily. Some will maybe do it twice a day. And then the last question is really around how long do you want to keep those backups? And that's commonly referred to as data retention, right? Do you want to keep it for a month, 6 months, a year? How frequently do you want that backed up? Now, as you can imagine, if you're only doing data backups nightly, your maximum recovery point objective is going to be 24 hours, right? And so that's the customer that says, hey, I can lose a day's worth of data. That's no big deal, right? So that is backups really in a nutshell. The other thing with backups, if that's all they have and they had a true disaster, we'd have nowhere to restore it to, right? We wouldn't be able to restore it to the original infrastructure that they were backing up from. Now, as a cloud provider, we're totally fine with that because they can simply pick up the phone and say, hey, can you fire up a couple of machines for me to restore this data to? It's probably not going to happen in 5 minutes, but we do our best to get them up and running as quickly as possible. So there is no stated service level agreement around the RTO in that example because they're not paying for disaster recovery. They're paying for backups. Disaster recovery, again, is real-time replication with a service level agreement that's contractually binding for us to replace that infrastructure within 4 hours. And so that's really the major difference between DR and DR and backups. And absolutely, both of those are offered as a managed service from RapidScale or self-service. So again, companies that maybe only have a couple of guys in IT or maybe none, I highly encourage buying that as a managed service. But companies that have 10 or 15 guys in IT that know what they're doing, they just need an off-site DR solution. We can sell that in an unmanaged scenario as well.
All right. So in the test case that you showed, what was the scale of that customer rec? How many terabytes were they backing up?
So that customer was about 10 terabytes of data. I think it was like 9.6, somewhere around that area. It was about 15 servers, and that's really the major variables that we care about. So just so you guys know, the way we quote this service is super easy. There's 2 variables: how many servers and how much data. We don't care about how many CPUs or how much memory or anything like that because we don't have the machines powered on our side. Right? So our costs are basically the licensing from Zerto and or DoubleTake and the storage that data lands on. So for us, we don't tend to ask a lot of questions around the CPU and memory requirements because, again, the machines are in a suspended state until they declare. That's really not an important data point for us. So that particular customer was around 10 terabytes. And around 20 machines. So very good standard kind of run-of-the-mill opportunity for us.
All right. Another one. Do you contact IT or the C-suite to have the initial BCDR conversation?
That's a great question. I think the answer to that is really depends on the size of the company. So if it's a 500-person company, probably don't need to go to the C-suite, right? You'd find the kind of most senior IT person, director or VP level of IT, and have that conversation. If it's a 50-person company, I'd go straight to the C-suite, the CFO, CEO, and have that, downtime discussion with them. And that's more of a, business decision, right? So definitely, depends on the size company, but, it never hurts to have a conversation with the C-suite if you've got the relationship. But I always take the approach of starting with the person I know the best and then working my way up.
All right. Last one for now. Can RapidScale serve as a failover when AWS fails?
Yeah, absolutely. So we sort of answered that on the earlier question, but absolutely, if they're in AWS today and they need, data, disaster recovery services, we do support replicating in from AWS, so not a problem at all.
I'm not sure exactly about this question, but I'll read it how it's written. When disaster occurs, you set up servers on the DR Cloud data center with production vCPU/RAM to support the workload?
Yes, I'll try to interpret that question. So yeah, so the source infrastructure, right, wherever that might be, on-premise, in another cloud provider, we're replicating it identically, right? The only difference is it's not powered on our side, so it's not consuming CPU and memory, it's just a reservation of CPU and memory. So if they've got 100 vCPUs and 400 gigs of RAM in their production environment, we're reserving that for them from the purpose of a disaster, but we're not actually using it. So absolutely, they'll have all the resources that they need to recover their environment. That's not a question at all. When we're planning and doing capacity planning for our infrastructure, we plan for our DR customers to have that service available, and we do put an SLA around it of 100%. So we're contractually binding. So I think as a channel partner, your goal to kind of discern the difference between us and someone else is to really read that fine print around declaration fees, around reservations, around SLAs, to really get a good feeling of how RapidScale would differentiate against another provider.
All right, so this one I'm not sure if it's referring to the case study we gave or a different example you just gave. But for the example you just gave, what are typical monthly costs for the customer? Yeah,
so super basic here. We charge $60 a month per machine that we protect. And so again, that's as I mentioned earlier, we really only care about two variables: the number of machines and the amount of storage, and we charge 20 cents a gig for the storage that it consumes. Those are the main two. If we need to provide a virtual firewall, that's a few $100s a month for that service. That's sometimes we have to do a cross connect, for example, if the customer's bringing in an MPLS or fiber connections to get back to their headquarters or to get onto their mesh network. That's a few $100s a month for a cross connect. But those are really the only variables in a comprehensive DR solution from RapidScale. Now, if they want us to front end it with a virtual desktop environment, the base infrastructure package to front end that so that we could scale to hundreds of users is about $2,000 a month or thereabouts. That would include all the infrastructure required to build out a VDI environment, as well as 20 desktop minimum to front end that. So not very expensive in the grand scheme of things is really the answer there.
I believe that is it for questions.
Okay, great. And if anybody does have questions that you didn't get answered, or maybe we didn't answer them as clearly as you'd like, obviously you follow up with us. You can email marketing@rapidscale.net. You can email your channel manager. You can go to our website and give us a call if you don't have our number. So thank you for joining again today, and hope to see as many of you as possible in Vegas next month. So have a great day.